Hello, black pupils. The FBI and other agencies have been changing and faking what's recorded on social media, and he has no idea. Like, for example, Judge Napolitano. And then he's going to try to, like everyone else, they're going to try to wait and make the subject treatments of the other people um, bring it onto paper, for example, or bring it onto a sense that could be put onto paper that making sense. Connecticut Interbranch have been switching names and planting predicate acts roles, federal evidences, crimes, identity thefts, and frauds, intercities of Connecticut, interbranch, into intelligence tied to them, the difference of that, foreign and domestic shared with together here and there. They're using such phenomenon to hide behind with overt, these overt predicate acts methods. Also, when they're ignoring people like me, they have obligations by the law. That's why, in other words, please, Judge Napolitano, hear me here through YouTube because they are lying about my social media. Weathersfield Police have with all a bunch of different police departments involved with a Mark Violet and with a Joshua Schumack and with a Larry Martin and with a Joe DeMoro and with a Ray Colo, Intercities, all along Route 3. Also with the Delaferra family and Spada family with probate court judges in their families involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with people at campuses putting predicate acts, fake transcripts, fake ties, fake natures of ties between kids, making fake exceptions where people that don't even know they put each other, they're at a spot and they take a picture of them. There's something to do with a Mike Delaferra has been planting evidences with foreign and domestic countries involved with fire campuses and medical campuses and people with Town Line Drive. Also, people with the names Kerr, also involved with the confessions of an officer, Jerry Miller. Well, I don't know if that's a real officer. In other words, but that's how they can make confessions too. And a Ray Colo, a Joe DeMar, it has something to do. A whole bunch of people from Hartford Hospital, and the Anthony Yagman is also with the Joshua Julian, and people all along Route 175 from the old Weathersfield founding locations, and with the news at corners of streets along from there, all along houses on corners at Church Street, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders, roles, influenced by others. But then, and the difference of that or themselves is recorded involved also with sequence shifts and people involved with the World Trade Center attack and the court next to it and all sides of that case and their sources. They were brought up by the people increasingly intercities involved with connected predicate acts against me and roles with use/s of confessions, a part of a method intercities where they have subject treatments, where the right to lie is recorded being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence on a mass scale. So there are methods and natures of organized crime. So there are predicate acts with facts methods, black pupils. It is time. Mass behavior racketeering, too. They attach people to fake behavior. They make people raise their voices where there is violence involved. And then they attach them fake behavior at other locations, pretend they raise their voices to others. And they change and fake what's recorded at the crime scenes increasingly. Increasingly, the same names have roles interbranch with body dumping spots and murderers themselves. And the names next to those body dumping spots that are also increasingly involved with other natures of organized crimes, like in West Hartford locations, increasingly with people at and all sides of the Weathersfield Community Center. And I only know this because, in other words, see, this breaching method uses locations, areas, and states everywhere the species body is criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions wrought. So we have experts on reason. There is a Christina Sioka I did shortly communicate with, but she has criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions wrought takes on American history and on reality. And she has but this is before she was a doctor. I never met her when she was a doctor. There's a doctor tied to her named Gilmore. And he pretended he spoke with me. I don't even know what he looks like. He's one of the ones intercities involved with foreign and domestic doctors forging each other's names. Roles with judges and prosecutors personally and professionally with this. And with uses of those locations /S, where they're putting faked and changed audio and video. As collusion /S, where they're doing it at campuses filmed 24/7. You think that would keep your kids safe? In other words, there are natures and methods of organized crime that no one wanted collusions with before modern countries were born, before America's founders were born. There are houses that are still standing. And if anyone had been found out to be speaking about building infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversations, including our founders, they were sensed by the breaching method and they would have been hurt. Everyone around them would have been, and worse. In other words, per method, had everyone fact-checked nature, tortured, extorted, and enslaved. We're supposed to we're supposed to allow honesty about the extortion of George Washington, relative to James Madison's plan too, and we were supposed to refer to the founders behind James Madison's plan as James Madison, is what I read. And nature itself shows us that there are three natures of Native American founders that we have to understand first. And where nature itself shows us that a human fact-cheating nature breaching method had been sustained upon these three natures of Native American founders before America's founders were born. And then there are three hyper-additional natures of Americans' founders as the ones behind James Madison's plan, as the value of the Constitution unabridged, and, as this being one of them. Three parts of one of them. And the reason why we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them. And they're even increasingly hyper-additional too. In other words. But we have readings of all natures of readings of statutes and precedents. We have how James Madison's plan did more to force the Civil War than anything else. And slavery was entrenched in the North and in the South, sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly. And rather than keep that clear, self-value roles, keeping that obfuscated, and other things others ourselves blame for what that caused and what that keeps increasingly hyper-additional with that, used to hide through and through. Behind and through, by the breaching method that knew that nature itself would demonstrate at countries A through Z. A human fact-cheating nature breaching method /S is one of the things that is true always. That was entrenched in our countries A through Z, since before our foundings are right through our country's foundings. But they had to speak about positive and be a theater anyway, otherwise be censored. Our founders declassified this. Nature itself declassifies this, black pupils. You don't bring up what witch trials were about or slavery without bringing up those laws against everyone, which brings up that method /S. And the breaching method, one of the things it did, it needs to have roles with, is keeping how nature communicates revelations and evidences, showing us we have black pupils, whites of eyes, showing us that simultaneously we have the same color eyes, while we have different color eyes at the same time for its body, also showing us /hyper simultaneously. Because it is showing us too, other species bodies have two eyes. They have quality /qualities. They have aspects /aspects. And they have nature /natures, like criminal insidiousness natures. In other words, like wrongdoers, like wrongdoer is doing itself. I'm not a lawyer. American history had lawyers, all sides of criminal and civil cases, the interbranch, the intelligence tied to them. At the same time, collusions with the difference of that too, at all communications locations, all news locations, formal, all exceptions like public television, and like roles with it. See, people involved with Connecticut's public television, or what is it called? Community access television, or public access television, and the location /S, and or the names next to them, per a method. See, intelligence communities A through Z, they have been using the right to lie, where they don't have the right to lie. Exactly the way the breaching method knew they would have to at countries A through Z, at locations, areas, and states everywhere the species body has a body standing. And it knew that they would have to blame other things, others, or selves for nature's demonstrations of that at those locations, other locations, at the same time, in other ways. And it knew that it could show that to the members of roles with itself, since before modern countries' founders were born. And it did that and sustained roles with itself without anyone realizing, because roles with itself was a method that would cause more problems, and then they would have to deal with that, and more they had as natures that would have to blame other things, others, ourselves, or nothing. How we are obligated to act, Black people. The suburbs were designed before America's founders were born to unfold as a theater, tactically denatured, and increasingly hyper-additionally reliant upon systems, on self-valuing systems, the only means to cause positive value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures by self-valuing collusion /S with overt negatives caused by the breaching method too, and maintained by it because it needs to hide its identity of relativity to ourselves by hiding its identity of relativity to our own people's formal and informal collusions with each other with syntactical convictions, for example, quality aspects and fact-achieving nature as criminal insidiousness /hypercriminal insidiousness. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a journalist. Connecticut's Channel 3 News attached me to fake conversations with themselves. They have roles with foreign and domestic intelligence, including military, a Kuwaiti general involved, and people with the name Violet, and a whole bunch of people at Harvard Hospital next to it in Harvard. They have roles with intelligence on all sides of Central Connecticut State University, where even themselves, they don't understand how they are used remotely, criminally foreign influence. To appreciate this, we have to simultaneously be appreciating where and how and why we could observe how and why they have self-valued roles with James Madison's communications changed, and self-valued roles with use /S of what our founders said, leaving out what they declassified about the breaching method that had been entrenched with that, leaving out how James Madison became our founder, as we were told to describe it, with the founders behind him, before George Washington became a president. George Washington to agreed to work with him to help them in that plan, and then to force the other nature of America's founders. More so, in other words, Native Americans were forcing each other to respond fact-achieving nature-wise, therefore more and more physically, to what they had to respond to, where and how. Names A through Z are being forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to roles tactical ulterior from what nature is forcing us to showing us. We're in systems tactical ulterior from how nature employed A through Z to be used, differences to be discerned and valued syntactically as the human species body of individual bodies, with all group differences being generated by that identity hyper simultaneous. That is not our species body. It is not the other species body. But it is anyway, to an extent. We are shown also the value of the rest of the extent of itself as two natures of, as two further, as three, a trinity. Because the rest of it that is beyond the scope that we could use to observe what is true always with it. To in the past, there's an extent we know that it's true always. There's an extent now active. There's an extent like how it shows us we know about the value of the seasons here now. But see, minds, applications of it, and through intelligence, it is through systems tactical ulterior from its own. Oh, but that's because of economy, jobs. Don't forget, this is see, the people. The difference between that or the people with no jobs, like in where there's a people stacking in New York City, and note how it's not by accident. This breaching method has manifest things that it maintained. And through other apparent and real motivations, nature's needs, interests. So it could hide behind that, like why and how really veterans' buildings are manifest the way they are. Like those buildings in New York City, with the people stacked, tactically denatured identity of the ground's identity relationship to itself. All landscape theater, suits and ties, counters and exceptions, and the differences with their fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature. They share what is used remotely to sense from abroad, but through our own, having entertained, not by accident, so many different natures and methods of organized crime, categorically timed collusion /S. Well, in other words, just it is also hyper evidential, for example, wherein how there have been descriptions of American history and about how the law involved color in the law. The law, that's because the law had that against every differences, and they had sense and sensibilities and acting. Otherwise, that body would be sensed, and that was trained. In other words, and then while there's the sensing with that, it's far short of a sophistication or those sides that were sharing the same. When they're fighting, that quality of fact, human nature that can't defend itself. And afford to be the identity of sophistication that's not going to leave out other names and use of that /S to hide behind too, the singular breaching method. When we appreciate it properly, we could use it to discern. Even if it's not a standing hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, a standing hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, trained. The reason in the syntax, the Boolean logic, A therefore B, at locations, areas, and states, A through Z. I mean, everywhere the species body is, even if they don't call it, locations, areas, and states. They do. In other words, because it is the same species body of individual bodies, all group differences, and generating also a special difference in our own, that it only wants to stay positive onto all parts of itself. Well, already the identity of all space /existence is equally positive to all parts of itself, the way your body is all only positive onto yourself as itself. but it is simultaneously the positive and negative simultaneously. No. And that's where this is also relative to where and to how and to why. People come with passions and emotions and, oh, well, are you a Christian? Are you a Catholic? In other words, the difference is. Meanwhile, the difference of where and how, at the beginning of the Old Testament, it says, only defend right here, where the names of the people of sciences will come together in the part that comes before it, which is where there is parsing as the identity of all space/existence, as its identity of relationship to itself, and as the value of that was each equally increasing. That is equally increasing. And to understand it, we have to take what we could understand to an extent as any subject treatment and appreciate it being led by that which is true always, not denying the slave sequence, not denying the hyper-evidential, which is hyper-native pure, and which would have long revealed the differences, collusion, even use/s consciously of the differences of the shortcomings and their defenses of American right and value and ground below their feet, its identity in relationship to itself, like with water, hyperdimensionally. Nature shows us cell, body, cell, nucleus, cell, wall, three values, wall/s, and a body of life, the body of the identity, hyper invisible, but still discernible. It is showing us the body of clear with positive or negative, the gases and their elements, relativity to what is positive to its bodies. The water and its elements, one of the things that makes water positive to everything at once, to make positive value nature progressions. See, the ancients were led by what's going to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere, including how we are fact treating nature. See, the fact treatments that are recorded, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, and this preaching method already showed each age of fact treatment nature where they had to hide roles of themselves or the other ages of fact treatment nature tied to them simultaneously, where and how this preaching method employed the suits and ties, counters, and exceptions. Exceptions as criminal enterprises, private, overt, too. Exceptions as opinion natures A through Z, as styles that are sharing the same quality aspects in nature, that are reliant in defenses of their syntax. In other words, relative to all subject treatments or name treatments. They're reliant upon criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, or all quality aspects of fact treatment nature. In nature itself has criminal insidiousness. So there is a criminal insidiousness, and the difference between the criminal insidiousness at the formal law locations, the private law locations, or the people speaking for the law at ground locations, or the people speaking for the law digital. These are all self-valued roles with mass digital crime methods, where there is mass faking and changing people's short words relative to, especially when they bring up predicate acts properly. When you bring up predicate acts properly, you don't leave out the breaching method, even though the only people that spoke on predicate acts at countries A through Z have not, they do so and did so the way the breaching method showed them, black pupils. It showed them to speak other, where there is integrity and where there's not integrity, for each age of fact treatment nature, where there's a theater concept with the voices that speak and pretend they are sciences, black pupils. It is time. So we need to force mandated law, because mandated law says that it's, in other words, they're not supposed to change and fake what we say about predicate acts. These are people at elderly homes, veteran homes, and child campuses, and medical campuses, and fire campuses, and connections made between them and the people next to them and corners of streets with it. There are people with the medical sides. There's an Institute of Living in Hartford, Connecticut that has a Leahy family involved with people with other interstates. At hospitals, they have a mental health care side. And there's all kinds of rackets with foreign and domestic that share roles with the mental health care side, and as with badges and gavels that are putting faked and changed transcript, a whole fake transcripts, conversations between people, and forging names of other doctors, and uses of remotely of the guilt narratives on all sides, because all sides were our collusion. For example, the World Trade Center attack, per another hyper foreign side involved that effectively was and is using remotely American voices and Saudi voices and the overall identity as collusion /S with at next to the network locations. The differences of the guilt there. There are people next to Fox Connecticut News in the state capitol who have roles all along Route 3 with interbranch names and intelligence tied to them, where they use their differences. Some black KKK Confederate flag themed, Latino themed. They have roles with, and the ones with increasingly a bunch of, like, more than one probate court families tied to the ones involved further with a principal child offender and with a Joshua Julian, and with Officer Jerry Miller, whose roles with predicate acts on planting evidences on all sides of my house. I don't know who Officer Jerry Miller is. They also, the Wethersfield police, pretended they had conversations with me as a kid and at the police station. I would never had a conversation with police at the police station as a kid as my wife. The one they wanted me to go down there to have a conversation with them, and my parents told them no. They communicated for me. And the ones who did go down there, they made it look like I was just in a car with a Ray Clough and a Chris Walters, because after they broke my car. I don't know who broke it. In other words, and then there are proofs that it was broken, sabotaged. In other words, and then a Ray Clough drove me to school with a Chris Walters that he communicated with. I never tried to contact the Chris Walters, and that's why I didn't even know him. Then I got to know him because then I found out the police wanted to communicate, and he made confessions. The police made him put fake natures of ties to me, and fake words with me. And these are police who have roles with overt criminal enterprises then, and increasingly with people involved with them with that. Hartford Hospital has roles with people Los Solido themed next to their location, and some foreign and Cuban themed as roles too, with the World Trade Center attack and with the torture, and with rackets with psychiatry, and ones with badges speaking about reason. They're tactically delusions rock, criminally foreign influence, fact-cheap nature, quality aspects of nature, from America to Cuba to Russia to Ukraine. Russians also involved with the fire campuses and their family members running into Hartford Hospital to hide lab regressions, having people describe fake conversations and ties between and instances mixed with the ones with that involved too. And the difference of that, it's relative to where and to how this chaos with the nature of the people that are formally speaking on subjects, and the relativity, and what they claim is relativity or non-relativity with exception, and with their subject treatment. Oh, that's not part of the subject. Witch trials. We're focused on witch trials. Holy God. You don't bring up witch trials without bringing those torture, extortion, slavery laws against everyone that were entrenched. Southern and northern colonies. And then America's founders were born. Black pupils. Step back. So follow mandated law, please. And everyone tell Judge Napolitano, I caught them using, changing, jumping in real and changing what's faked and faking what's recorded. The differences between the social media show needs to do that and pretend for other motivations, and the differences of the FBI, the difference of New Britain Superior Court, Wethersfield Police, people at the Connecticut corrections offices, at and next to it, or driving by. That difference too, with his Trinity involved here, per science. And the same thing with the Connecticut judicial branch offices. They are recorded involved with a South Saviello, people that lived across the street from a South Saviello, and other people tied to a South Saviello, involved with state police, and people all along Two Rod Highway, Hangdog Lane, involved with judges and prosecutors, and foreign and domestic families with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and with former mayors involved intercities with it, and with doctors, with including with proven child abusers, leaders of the kids, and more people involved with it. A Rick Paglione recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There are intelligence people with like a Brian Silver. He's involved with New Britain Superior Court and New Haven's District Court and Hartford courts, with planting evidences and fake ties and fake natures of ties to people, remote uses, criminally foreign influence of investigators. Even when they record things, they record other things first, saying other. They have people that influence, has something to do with their roles with names. A Bobby or a Bobby Jean, men and women that use the name Bobby with the state police and the FBI and other agencies associated on all sides of Central Connecticut State University in the New Britain, Connecticut. The recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed collusion / asked with a whole bunch of people from Wethersfield, that from other areas that planted evidences on my street from other areas, which is also evidences, because these things were also confirmed on Facebook. A Robert Rodriguez has roles with some untimely deaths, per him. And in other words, he told me these confessions to me to make it look like he knew me. A Robert Rodriguez has roles with names all along Route 3, involved with child abusers, leaders of the kids before they were first forced too, and people on all sides of a religious spot not near his house, involved with the World Trade Center attack, with foreign and domestic military. Mark Violet is one of the ones that has that said there were also and demonstrated. Increasingly, Hartford Hospital has roles with foreign and domestic military, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. At Tomorrow's Market, people where it was there next to Hartford Hospital and where it is now in Rocky Hill, they have roles with all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes with foreign and domestic families, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders. Has something to do. People tied to John Maiano said it has something to do with his father's roles with with their roles. Not, but I found out it's his father's roles, but with their roles with modern pastry. They've been and people associated with corners of streets near schools, with the Leahy family and medical offenders putting fake people from California with police forms are associated with these medical locations too. Investigators. These are at locations that are filmed 24/7. They're putting fake ties and fake natures of ties between people, putting fake transcripts into records and using that to cover up how they already used all natures of investigations. Or there were roles with U/S of all natures of investigations, investigators, their campuses, their homes, and the difference of the names next to them, like even their neighbors, the names on all sides of campuses. There was a method by this which holds it manifest, where and how there are names uses and differences uses, tactical terror from how nature employ these names and differences and demonstrations of it and demonstration of its own. That none could fake black pupils, but see whites of eyes. See black pupils, whites of eyes. We have the same color eyes a different color eyes at the same time. Per that identity that is hyper invisible but still discernible. Conjunction / hyperconjunction to all the parts of speech, of languages, and of English grammar that are invisible but still discernible. So we'll examine this. But in other words, we'll examine the identity of the predicate, for example, of any identity. Well, we'll examine it, examinable and being greater than and more finite than its physical body. So, in other words, and the parsable natures. We will examine how they are grouped relative to this, where how any subject individually grouped or together, it comes with its complete identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that equally increasing, where how the identity of that hypersimultaneous demonstrates to us what is most probable and most practical to theorize, let alone to convict about where how everything was generated. Like humanity, the sciences, their voice, their nature, they are being and have been lied to since they were kids. So the intelligence community has been changing and faking and hiding the substance of my words and the actual words to Judge Napolitano before he left his roles with Fox News. These are also roles with use /s consciously by the breaching method of the difference of how they valued states' rights or federal. The difference of that was is used also remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought, syntax and nature, black pupils. Forgiveness is to force this quality of fact, chibi nature, being led by that, which is true always. It is the value of the difference between the smallest finite detail or the order of the finite, where and how it is relativity / hyperrelativity too, as one of the things that is replaced, as what nature shows us, and where we have roles, blaming other things other than ourselves, for things our founders communicated to blame on the breaching method, and nature itself demands this, black pupils. They put us in fake behavior in other locations, and they lie about their motivations. You got to get them on paper. Judge Napolitano. I'm talking now. I want a response for the people at the elderly homes, veterans, and child campuses, medical and fire at the same time, intercities, the same ones, timed roles with body dumping spots. And as people time collusion /s at corrections and next to the corrections offices and at the Wethersfield judicial offices and next to them, increasingly people involved with my grammar school and former mayors of Wethersfield involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and sticking fake things in databases. In other words, let's get them on paper. So in other words, a whole bunch of bodies, like the people that live across the street from South Seville, recorded involved with multiple body dumping spots with their roles with the state judicial branch offices, also with houses next to there, per Enzo Fienza. And his roles also recorded with people involved with the World Trade Center, also as victims, but also having been involved with organized crimes, methods, and identity theft, fraud, slanders, predicate acts, worse than criminal incompetence as lawyers A through Z, private, interbranch, they're switching names. They're refusing to identify themselves legitimately. Increasingly, people on Valley Crest and Wethersfield, Connecticut are involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, sequence shifts, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. Finelli told me that his wife, well, you didn't say it like that, I don't even know him. He's one of the ones that sought me out to make a fake exception. That is in demonstration that he used that exception, criminally foreign influence, has roles with it, with his neighbors too, involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, foreign and domestic military, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, sick, fake punks. In other words, so I don't know. In other words, it has something to do with the roles. With his wife was in a class I had. I never had a communications with her. she's a nice person. I know, but we never have communication. And there are proofs that these are people involved with there was a DACA program that is interstate. Like there are proofs that that teacher, I never had a personal conversation with him too. Either no, little bit. He told me about where I could get a job. In other words, there was hardly any words. In other words, there are people making it look like there. I had conversations with people, also with teachers. I never had even words at all personal. This is relative. What was brought up with the people at these spots, at elderly spots, child campuses, fire and medical, that brought up too at the same time. The untimely deaths, murder rolls, like having people from other areas make confessions on my street to me through time, and tied to untimely deaths. They have people tied to a Halperin house that I don't know the names of, involved with my past neighbors, and they switched their names with the name Lewis and Cleza per some courts and police forms and foreign bodies involved with them, criminally foreign, abused them since they were kids. In other words, where they're lying to everyone and about everyone else around them, and then they're making roles with that self-value. Then they're pretending fake passions and emotions. They're only capable of it. So then it becomes dangerous to even speak with people, because these are people with trying to bring things to issues on paper, criminally foreign influence ways, because they can't afford to have things on paper proper legitimately. That's why they switch names into branch with some black KKK theme, black Latino theme, put in sequence shifts, fake motivations for it, fake ties, fake natures of ties to be people, as collusions with falsified police reports, fake ties to police at the Wethersfield Police Department too. And they do things like put a charge with no writing and make confessions attached to it. But they already did that with other ones too. No, God knows what they put in the database. Only fake, only capable of self-valuing all natures of investigators in their campuses being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. So all sides of criminal and civil cases are people intercities, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people at the corners of Elm Street and Rocky Hill and Wethersfield, involved with former police chiefs, with medical and sexual offenders of kids, including digital, also with FBI and whiting forensics. Increasingly, people tied to this Joshua Julian and Mark Violet, and involved with the Robert Rodriguez and people from other areas. Also, ones involved with home break-ins. Heather Hansen has roles with at least 3 home break-ins in my area, and people. One of them was the same house at least 2 times. One time might have been murder of a Miss Halperin, who I loved. I barely knew her, but I loved her. In other words, and these are people that are increasingly involved with untimely deaths at other locations of recorded time use / estimate. They arrested me with harassment, and they faked conversations with me to do it. And they hid the principal child abuser's confessions to me and what was recorded, how it was brought up by people with confessions on my street about their roles with untimely deaths that I don't know. They're trying to tie me to the Wethersfield police phones families and the people at the campuses putting predicate acts with their educators, fake ties to people in other classes. They try to make fake exceptions, and they're putting fake things there too with that. There's a Steven Stocko who has roles with Central Connecticut State University intelligence, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, and people with the state judicial branch offices. And next to it, they have roles with a Maria Pizzino, also with her neighbors, all along Route 3, with people all along Route 3, like Hangdog. I mean, and its conjunctions like Hangdog Lane, and conjunctions to that like Hangdog Lane and 2 Rod Highway. In other words, and there are people that with the name Casper. Increasingly, people with the name Casper are also being and have been brought up to me by people just name drop, make it look. They're for some reason they're trying to make it look like I even had one word of conversation to a Czech Casper or any Casper in my life. He has something to do with the whole bunch of people at the sides of the state capitol and at it who are involved with how the breaching method uses remotely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, rot, each age and nature of campus, black pupil, and roles self-value, leaving out what is hyper evidential and the value of that, pretending it's debatable. That, oh, Einstein said there's a theory of relativity. There's a relativity. We have black pupils, whites of eyes. We have the same color eyes at the same time. Other species' bodies have two eyes, quality aspects of nature distinct, but non-distinct and simultaneous, but also per that further hyper simultaneous, not them nor us, but anyway, humanity pray, vaccine. The Trinity in Allah's name, there are proofs that these are elements that were preserved. But the sciences have stayed criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, incapable of affording discern how the ancient pantheism was led by the identity of the hyper and simultaneous that we could discern to an extent. But where it comes to that extent of what is true always, it comes also with its complete identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. In other words, and there are revelations. It is a manifest course and way to think. But we have people say, "Oh, well, nobody thinks the same." Well, that's because you guys have styles of difference, needing to hide sides of issues. The way the breaching method set them to be up. The breaching method employed differences to be used tactical terror from how nature uses them, and then to have defenses of roles with that, styles as that increasingly can't afford to be, let alone to protract short words with convictions proper regarding theory, let alone convictions with blame and guilt. So Russians are right and Americans are right when each side says the other side's wrong. But both sides are wrong and right exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. And it's not A through Z. But it increasingly needs to hide behind all grouping voices of humanity too, and all humanity voicings. Having entertained theater tactically as criminal diseases / hypercriminal diseases of nature, and pretending other simultaneously. Black pupils, fake branches bow and they recede, and break and fall and they recede. Then proceed, build wall. Thank you. Shout out to Mexico and Canada. You know what we should do right on top of these things? We should set up, because America, Russia, and Mexico and all countries A through Z, we're forced to fight or to be unity with each other, tactical terror from how nature shows us. So we can make hyper positives out of negatives. And I'll donate the plan. All we need is someone that will help truly, in other words, and we'll just stack another nature of industry. Like, for example, a company, ACM. If there's not an ACM, it would be something that sounds like that. And that's just in alphabetical order: America, Canada, Mexico. We can make a superhero, for example, a virtual superhero, a virtual comedian. We can make a virtual country, especially But only the whole species body we could grab. We can make means out of nowhere for the homeless, and this makes all kinds of easements on potentials. Oh, but our jobs reliant upon homeless. So we have to change the nature of industry. So, in other words, some industries are costing. They're criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, rot still. Their roles with that breaching method, which assign roles, speaking about difference, tactical ulterior from how nature does. Black pupils, prepare, vaccines. YouTuber Anthony Wall, the wall. In other words, see cell body, cell nuclear, cell wall /S, and the clear when positive. Gases in their mixture and water in their elements. The hyper clear, the hyper invisible but still discernible is what we are appreciating. We appreciate why and how we need these more names than one for the verb, and why those participles are grouped, and why the infinitive is and the participle are about time /forever nature. We'll examine this. And forever nature /time. Prepare each mind. Vaccines.